Today we're carrying on with our NHL offseason plan series. We're looking at the 19th best team from the NHL's regular season, the Philadelphia Flyers. What's in store for them this offseason? We'll discuss that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, today we're carrying on with our offseason plan series where we're looking and analyzing the Philadelphia Flyers. Now, of course, they had another somewhat disappointing season. I think people had higher hopes for the Flyers this year, expected them to be a playoff team. On paper, they looked a lot better than how they performed, that's for sure. And I do feel there's going to be some, reasonably significant changes here, given the disappointment and what they need to do to get back on track. Now, it may not be astronomical, but there's bound to be some changes for sure. Now, from what we can gather, it looks as though Coach Alain Vigneault is staying put. It doesn't look like there's any changes in management or anything of that nature. It's all going to be within their roster. So we're going to take a look at the regular season statistics for the Flyers, look at their cap space, what contracts are coming due, and then the 5 burning questions facing this franchise as they aim to get better and back on track for next year. So let's start by looking at the regular season stats here for the Flyers. Now, as you can see, they finished with a record of 25, 23, and 8 for 58 points. They were a minus 38 in a goal differential column for a team that actually had more wins than losses. It's kind of mind-boggling, but they had some really lopsided, embarrassing losses against the Rangers. Mika Zibanejad himself completely owned this team and put up numerous huge point games against them, and I think a lot of that contributed to this minus 38. Now, of course, they likely would have been a minus something or other without those games, but those games did contribute a lot to this, and don't let you think that it didn't, because those you take away those embarrassing ones and at least it's a little bit more respectable, that's for certain. Now, looking at their special teams, they actually had a decent power play. It's not great, but 19.2%, 18th best in the NHL, so not too far off from being average in the midway point of the league. The PK, though, was horrific, 73.1 for 30th best. Ideally, that is way, way under what it needs to be. Ideally, you want that closer to 80%. Typically, you want your power play and your PK numbers to add up to 100 or better, so you can say your special teams are at least breaking even, and at least they're remotely successful. The higher you go over 100, just goes to show you how much stronger they typically are, and these two numbers do not get us there. They're well below, so both need improvement, especially the PK. And it's something that's really utmost importance here for this team heading into next season. Now, looking at their salary cap space, they have $12.25 million going into next year that's available, but they do have some very interesting names on the expiring contract list, which we'll jump into momentarily here. But obviously, this Flyers team needs improvement, and I think we're going to see, like I said, at least a variety of moves. So let's take a look at the contract situation for the Flyers facing this offseason for their restricted free agents and unrestricted free agents. Now, in the RFA column, they have Nolan Patrick, the former number 2 overall selection, who we will be talking about here in the 5 burning question segment coming up. You have to wonder what his future holds. You have defenseman Travis Sanheim. I think Sanheim's a big part of the team's future. Don't see him going anywhere, so I believe Sanheim will get paid. And you get Carter Hart. Now, Carter Hart's not picking a good time here for an expiring contract, given the season he's coming off of. But sometimes those things happen. I do think a bridge deal is likely what we're going to see for the Flyers netminder. After the way this past season went, I can't imagine the Flyers are going to be handing out 7-8-year contracts to their young goaltender, even though before the season started, they might have thought they were going to go down that road because he was trending towards being such a lock to be a great goalie for a long time. And I think he can get there. But at the end of the day, his status is a big question mark that we're going to discuss further as well. Now, on the UFA side of things, we have Samuel Morin, who's a Group 6 free agent due to the lack of games played. Morin is a big body who's had a lot of potential and has had so many injuries, it's not even funny. This poor guy has battled so many things and has missed so much time, which is why he's a Group 6, because there's just no time for him to get the games played requirement in to be a restricted free agent. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with him. I'm not sure if he comes back or not. I know they've even tried him at forward. Obviously because of the injuries he's had, especially with the knees. I'm not sure that they want him to be a defenseman anymore, which is what he was drafted and brought up as. So I don't know what's going to happen with his future. Big question mark there. You do have goalies Brian Elliott and Alex Lyon, both UFAs. So their whole goaltending situations, 1, 2, and 3, all need new deals. So Carter Hart does get signed, I have no doubt. But Elliott and Lyon are certainly question marks, which we'll explore further here. And then, of course, you do have a couple of guys that were mainly taxi squad members, didn't see a whole lot of ice time or playing time. But that's Nate Prosser and Andy Andreoff, who, both those guys very well likely don't return. So, obviously, like I said, this Flyers team doesn't have a ton of room, but they do have some interesting contracts to look into. But, you know what? I think this is going to be a team that their salary cap situation is going to change, because there's bound to be at least a few trades going into the offseason and possibly some free agency as well. So now let's jump into the 5 burning questions facing the Philadelphia Flyers this offseason. Number 1, the biggest top burning question for me is goaltending. 1, can Carter Hart bounce back? What kind of contract does he get? And who backs up Carter Hart next year? Do they once again bring back Brian Elliott? I mean, Elliott's an older, experienced goaltender. Been pretty steady through most of his career, but the last couple of seasons, his numbers are not fantastic. Alex Lyons, even though he's been in the organization a long time, it seems like he should be a younger goalie, but he's actually 29 now. So I really don't see either of those guys really being the main backup next year. I think it's time to move on from Elliott and bring in another guy for Carter Hart to work with as a backup, or more of a 1A, 1B situation. I think Carter Hart's issues last year were largely between the ears. I don't think it's a skill issue. Obviously, the guy's got skills. He's an excellent goaltender, and sometimes when you're, you get rattled and you lose your confidence, it can have a huge impact on how you perform. And I think that's a huge part of what happened to Carter Hart last year. And I can just imagine what all the different things he's going to be doing to get himself back on track, on top of all your regular training and all that stuff and goalie skills and all the normal work you do. I am sure he's probably spending time with sports psychologists, which he likely does anyways, and trying to get some of the stuff figured out. The goalie coach is going to have a big role. So to me, that is huge for the Flyers going into next year. I think they signed him to a bridge deal, a couple of seasons. Obviously, he'll get a bit of a raise. I'm not sure exactly what the number works out to be given last year's performance. I don't think it's huge, but it's best for him to kind of bet on himself for a 1 or 2 year deal where he'll be an RFA again, and then kind of go from there. But I do think that they dip into the market. If nothing else really presents itself that's reasonable, maybe they go back to Elliott as a last scenario, last ditch effort. But to me, I think there's going to be enough veteran guys out there. I think that might be a better option for them. And of course, if they have some trade talks, which they're going to be having around several players, maybe another goalie comes back into the picture that way too. I don't know. But to me, they need a more stronger backup to relieve Carter Hart, take the pressure off. And if they can find that via free agency, it might be the best way to go about it. The number 2 burning question is, can they find a defenseman to play that top pair with Ivan Provorov? That is a huge part of this team's problem last year. They lost Matt Niskanen, who was a big-time stabilizing type defenseman, and that had more impact on this franchise than many people probably understand or realize. You take away one stabilizing player like that, it can throw everything off. It probably threw Provorov out of his element. He was probably not as comfortable doing all the things he normally does, especially from joining the rush, the offensive side of the game. And obviously your defense is what starts your breakouts. It's what gets your offense going. They can jump up into the rush if they have that ability. And they just didn't have that this year. And having another defenseman who can play with Provorov so he can be that guy that's really a key cog in the offense, they need that stabilizing guy. So they need to find him. That should be a really, really top priority for them. There's talk that Seth Jones is wanting out of Columbus, or at least that he won't re-sign. So there's obviously a lot of talk he's going to be traded. I don't know if he would sign an extension with the Flyers, but he is exactly what they need. Now, the only problem is you're not going to want to pay too big a dollar here if he's not going to sign a contract to stay for only going to get one season out of him. So I'm not sure how they proceed there. But to me, if I'm Philly, I'm exploring Seth Jones. I think he'd be a perfect fit. He's still not all that old. He's obviously only in his mid to late 20s. You can get him, if he does sign, if you can get him on a 5-6 year deal, that would be ideal. So that way he's only into his mid 30s. He's a right shot, opposite a left shot for Ivan Provorov. And maybe in a trade like that, maybe you can move out some assets that really need a change of scenery, and that Columbus might be more willing to take a chance on, like a Gostisbehere, for example. I still think he can play and can contribute closer to the level he did when he was, at his peak, but I don't know what's going to take to get him there. I know he's had some injuries, but still, either way, regardless of what happens with Gostisbehere, I think he could be included in this kind of trade. Obviously, you're moving a defenseman, you're going to want one back. Now, they may not be real high on him. I'm not sure how they feel about it, but to me, the Flyers really need that defenseman on the right side. Now, there will be some options in free agency, but given their limited cap space, I think they are more likely to address this by trade, given that they can get some assets going out to kind of offset things. So we will see. But to me, that's a huge priority for Philly. Now, the third burning question for me, like I just was mentioning, is will we finally see a Shane Gostisbehere exit out of Philadelphia? It's been talked about now for well over a year, probably about a year and a half. It's yet to happen. He even went through waivers this past year, was not claimed. So you have to wonder what's going on with Gostisbehere and how the other NHL teams feel about him. Will Seattle take him in an expansion draft? At this point, I really don't think the Flyers care. I think they just need that cap space back and move the contract, even if the return is next to nothing. That's why, to me, if they are going to acquire a defenseman like a Seth Jones, even if he's a throw-in, to me, that's a player that they need to move on from, or he goes to Seattle, or they do something. But a buyout is still a tad bit expensive given the remaining term. But I think this is finally going to be the time when they figure out a way to move on from that contract. Now, burning question number 4 is, do they trade the former number 2 overall pick Nolan Patrick? It's been reported that he wants out of Philly, wants a fresh start, not fond of the coach Alain Vigneault. He recently changed agents, which is largely into preparation for getting this done and going to a new team. I don't know what he prefers or where he prefers to go, but he will not really have a whole lot of say in the mix here. Now, I know there was some talk that Vegas was interested at the deadline, given his connection to GM Kelly McCrimmon. Of course, Nolan Patrick came from the Brandon Wheat Kings, where McCrimmon used to run that team and knew the players for a long time before making the jump to the NHL. So he knows what he's capable of if he can hit his full potential at the NHL level. So they might be willing to take a chance on him. And of course, you have to wonder, maybe even his hometown team in Winnipeg too. The Jets are going to be in a situation where they may not bring back Paul Stastny. They might need some more help at the center position, and they might be willing to take a chance on this guy too. So I don't know exactly where he goes, but word is he wants out, and the fresh start is what's needed. That's what he wants. Not fond of how he's been handled and all that. So if he's really feeling that way, it's certainly best that they move on and get him onto a new team. Hard to say what the return is going to be. Unfortunately, given the fact that even though he was a former number 2 overall pick, I don't think they're going to get a lot in return. Now, the fifth burning question is, will we see more of a core shakeup here within some of their top guys? There's already some rumors floating around out there about what might be available. I'm not sure we're going to see a guy like Giroux or Voracek traded. Obviously, Giroux is only done a 1 year. He's got obviously a lot of trade protection in his contract. Voracek still has a lot of term on his. There was a lot of questions around JVR in his $7 million contract last year. I wouldn't be surprised if he's exposed to the Kraken in the expansion draft. Not sure they'll take that contract, obviously, because of the amount of money, but it's an option that could be there. And I even seen a rumor about Travis Konechny possibly being available in a team like the Maple Leafs being interested. I saw that yesterday as well, so I'm not really sure why they'd want to move Konechny. He's certainly a younger player that's been relatively productive. You'd think they'd be looking to find ways to move some other guys, but obviously if you want value, you get a trade value. You get Sean Couturier is down to one more year on his contract too. I don't really know what they're going to do here, because obviously I think their preferred players to move, if they did move a vet, would probably be a guy like James Van Riemsdyk. I don't think, like I said, I don't think Giroux or Voracek are going anywhere. I would not think Konechny would be really being moved, but you never know. I guess it depends on what they bring back. If he were to go to the Leafs like that rumor was suggesting, I'm not sure what they would send the Flyers' way. So obviously we'd have to discuss that further and see what the deal is. But obviously I think this team has been disappointing. They've been inconsistent up and down the last number of years. They probably do need a little bit of a shakeup, and we'll have to see what they do. We also have a relatively high mid-first round pick in the 2021 NHL Draft. Wouldn't be shocking if they use that pick in order to try to make an acquisition too. So that could be like when I talk about Seth Jones or another player coming in to shake things up on this Flyers team. That first round pick very well could come into play, and it would not be shocked at all if they decided to go ahead and trade it. But either way, this team is inconsistent. It needs some changes. Those are my opinions on what the most likely top burning questions are and what they need to address here. So let me know what you think down below in the comments, and we will discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news and rumors for all 32 NHL teams. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.